As a huge fan of role-playing games, it pains me to say that I've never been able to sit down and play a proper tabletop RPG. I love the deep lore and interesting worlds that these properties have built, but for one reason or another, I've just never played the games that exist within them. And if you're like me, there's a good chance you're missing out on some seriously interesting storytelling. Or at least you would be if White Wolf weren't smart enough to make video games out of their best IPs. Today, let's take a look at another attempt to bring class to us filthy electronic gamers in the form of one kick-ass demon-slaying action RPG. I'm Jared, and this is Avalanche Reviews.
Dirtier. And dirtier. Until it jams.
Okay, so let's start off with the first glaring issue. I am reviewing the second game in the Hunter series here. Now you may be asking yourself why. Am I being artistic or purposely ironic? No, not really. I've just been playing this one a lot lately. So with that out of the way, in Hunter the Reckoning Wayward, we pick up right where we left off. Ashcroft, the setting of the first game, has started to return to normal after a good demon sweeping, but it seems the job is never really done when you've been imbued with supernatural powers to protect mankind from the forces of darkness. The cast of the first game have all come together again when a fellow hunter sends out a distress call shortly before going missing. From here, our protagonists must find their fellow demon slayer and get to the bottom of a mysterious cult that now calls Ashcroft home. Those of you familiar with the first entry in the series may be crying foul right now, as this looks like a retread of old ground on the surface, and if we're being honest, it kind of is. The best way I can explain it is comparing it to the sequels found in the Stalker series. But these games don't want to take their audience in a brand new direction. Instead, the creators really just want the fans to be able to revisit this dark little RPG world. Throughout the game, I got a kick out of checking back on these familiar locations, but for those of you not easily swayed by revisiting the good old days, there are new parts of the city to explore. Just like White Wolf's other ventures into video games, Wayward's best feature is its rich lore. The game's narrative tells the player enough to satisfy, but it's obvious that you're experiencing just the tip of the iceberg that is the world of darkness. If you enjoy rich, developed worlds in your games, or just relish in the idea of demons and humans battling it out in a modern American city, I can assure you Wayward will not disappoint.
Have you ever tried to get that rot smell off a knife? It takes hours.
The Hunter the Reckoning games are pretty unique as far as action RPGs go. They play like a twin-stick version of Gauntlet with melee, long-range, and magic attacks, but they contain limited role-playing elements like character leveling and very simple inventory systems for guns and other projectiles. When selecting an area of the city to tackle from the main hub, you can choose your hunter, I've always been partial to Father Cortez, and what sub-weapon you want to bring into the fray. Combat in the game can be a little hard to adjust to, but for some reason, I just can't think of a hunter game having any other style. It's kind of like Resident Evil games without tank controls, it just doesn't make sense. Okay, so in the simplest sense, you move your hunter with the left stick and aim your melee, projectile, or magic attacks with the right stick. One of the changes from the first entry is a limited amount of ammo for your hunter's default sidearm, so in this sense, Wayward is much more close-range oriented than you might be used to. Now, I'm gonna try to word this just right. As a fan of the games, I can honestly say the gameplay found in the series is straddling a very thin line between quasi-functional and a broken mess. Since there are no noticeable frames of invincibility after taking damage and pretty drastic hit animations, new players will find themselves getting caught up in semi-infinite stun locks fairly often. After getting a real grasp on the game style, it's a little easier to avoid unfair situations, but all it takes is the right group of enemies in just the right spot to have even the most calm gamers putting holes in the adjacent drywall. Since Wayward has a larger focus on melee combat, you'd figure it would be handled well, but sadly, this is not the case. In any combat-oriented game, an attack from the player will typically lead to some type of short interrupt state, so both characters aren't damaging each other at the same time. But in Wayward, it's totally possible for an enemy to damage you the entire way through your own combo, even while every hit is successfully landed. Now I say there's no stun effect, but that's not entirely true, as you will see enemies stumble back after a good hit, but this is a very rare occurrence, and in a game that has you facing at least 100 demonic baddies per level, this can lead to some unfair situations. Now I know exactly what you're thinking. Is this a new occurrence, or is this a common problem found in the series? Well, I would love to tell you that, but I haven't played the other two games since I was in high school, so let's default to an expert in the field, my friend from Viridian Flashback, the Dolly Popka. So Popka-senpai, as someone who just reviewed all 3 Hunter games, are these issues common in the rest of the series, and if so, do you think they drag the experience down any?
Surprisingly, Jared, the enemies don't really have that much of a knockback, and when faced with a swarm of the undead, you can have your health drained in no time if you don't keep a good distance away. And this isn't just for Hunter's PlayStation 2 foray, as this was just as bad in the first installment on Xbox. However, in the final installment, Redeemer, High Voltage listened to whatever feedback they might have received and fixed this problem, as enemies have that necessary knockback that one should have after being cleaved in the face by a giant axe. Or whatever tool Hunter would fancy.
Well, there you go guys, the expert has spoken, and a mighty thank you, sir, for coming on the show.
Wait, don't you always end these segments on a witty quip or thoughtful statement?
Well, yeah, I guess I do.
Well, this is gonna sound strange, but I've always wanted to see you end on a clip of a guy hitting a werewolf with a shovel and then getting punched in the face.
Well, that's an oddly specific request, but hey, sure, why not?
Rise and shine, sweetheart. It's parole time. God come and saved your ass. Now get out of my cell.
It's no secret that the PS2 could pump out some impressive examples of graphical prowess. I mean, look at the mastery found in games like Shadow of the Colossus or Silent Hill 3. A large development team with a big budget and extensive knowledge of the platform could easily take advantage of the wealth of horsepower hiding inside this little black box. This game's developers, however, had none of these attributes, so what we have here isn't going to be making any best looking games list. That being said, I wouldn't call this a bad looking game. While there are some pretty muddy textures and the quality of the CG cutscenes isn't the best, there are aspects worthy of some praise. The environments are all convincing looking, especially the city levels, and for a game that takes place in modern time, this is a must. Some of the monster designs are alright, and seeing the light from magic spells and muzzle flare reflect on the environment is always nice. If you're a fan of the first game and any of this looks familiar to you, there's a very good reason for that. This is made in the exact same engine and uses 90% of the assets from the first Hunter the Reckoning. This kept development costs down and let them churn out a sequel in record time, so if you loved cutting up zombies in Ashcroft but wish there was a little more to do, you're in luck. If you're looking for a brand new big budget production, well, maybe this YouTube channel might not be the best place for you. In the realm of RPGs set in the world of darkness, it's slim pickings for sure, but could this be the dark supernatural RPG for you? Let's take a look at the pros and cons to find out. The world of darkness has so much established lore, it's impossible not to feel immersed. Most people hate grinding in RPGs, but when you have satisfying combat and zombies, building up your favorite hunter becomes crazy fun. Those of you who played the first game will get a kick out of reuniting with the entire cast. Killing supernatural foes by yourself is fun, but plugging in a second controller and slaughtering zombies back to back with a second player is a fucking blast. HTR Wayward is an exact copy of its predecessor. If you didn't like the way that game looked, don't expect a huge improvement here. Attacking an enemy in this game is a pretty big commitment. Attack animations will play out no matter what, so if you hit the attack button 4 times, expect to wait through 4 attacks. I'll never know why this game's developers thought including an archaic lives system was a good idea. Luckily, extra lives are pretty easy to earn, but this could increase the difficulty for new players. Well, with that out in the open, I can honestly say that I recommend this little gem. There are some serious problems inherent to having such a small, unexperienced team making a game, but if you're a fan of action RPGs or the world of darkness, you're likely to overlook these issues. I've always loved these semi-modern supernatural tales, and Hunter the Reckoning definitely delivers. Plus, if you're a fan of Vampire the Masquerade games, this is the closest you'll ever get to another glimpse in that world. Well guys, that's all I've got for now, but I will be back soon, so until next time, I'm Jared. and this has been Avalanche Reviews. Alright guys, thanks for checking out another episode. If you think the Hunter games might be up your alley, go check out the Viridian Flashback channel where the Dolly Popka has reviewed each and every entry in the series. And maybe before you head out, smash that like button and subscribe for more of, whatever the hell you call this that I do around here.